it could be the greatest merger of all time or a geopolitical disaster. Shark Tank star and proud Canadian Kevin O'Leary is making a stunning claim that half of his fellow Canucks, that's about 20 million people, are open to President-elect Trump's bold pitch to make Canada the 51st state. And he's even willing to go down to Mar-a-Lago to help broker the deal. Watch.
Canadians over the holidays, the last 2 days, have been talking about this. They want to hear more. Think about the power of combining the two economies, erasing the border between Canada and the United States, and putting all that resource up to the northern borders where China and Russia are knocking on the door. So secure that, give a common currency, figure out taxes across the board, get everything trading both ways, create a new, almost EU-like passport. I like this idea, and at least half of Canadians are interested.
And that's not the only person showing up at Mar-a-Lago. Two top Canadian cabinet members are meeting with Trump's team and border czar Tom Homan today. They aim to hammer out a border security plan that Canada hopes will ward off Trump's threats to impose economically damaging tariffs on imports. Homan is telling Fox that Canada is, quote, ready to go on immigration enforcement, and Trump himself has made it clear where he stands.
Essentially, we're paying Canada, and we love Canada. I have so many friends. I love Canada. I love it. But why are we spending $150 billion on Canada? Yet Canada allows people and drugs to flood in through our northern border.
So I caught your face as I was talking, and it wasn't just because I called Kevin O'Leary Ken. What do you think about this merger idea, Tyrus?
I think both of his watches are broken. Like, okay, there's no 50% of Canadians willing to give up Canada. I mean, that's their country. They'd be like 50% of Americans being like, oh yeah, we want to join the other side. It almost sounds like a promotional stunt for a TV show. I think the Canadian government is paying attention because President Trump is putting tariffs. He's trolling them. He's having a good time with it. And maybe Mr. Wonderful is trying to get on it. But 50%, I'd love to see the poll. Like, you know, it goes back to what this administration is trying to do is not a laughing matter. President Trump is putting his foot down and he's using tariffs to get them to come to the table. I think there's a huge conservative presence in Canada, but we haven't seen it for a long time. And let's be honest, if Canada became a country that will play along with this game, okay, it would be, they're one of the most liberal countries, which means the 2 Senate seats that they would have would make Jessica's day because they would both be liberal and would lose the Senate. So thank you, no, we're good.
Okay.
No deal, as they would say in Guppy Tank or Shark Tank or whatever it is.
Shark Tank, which I was watching last night before I go to bed.
Traitor.
Just kidding. Really? It's so good. So Trump is getting his desired effect, right? People are coming. He's holding court there. He has a transition team down there. But this is pretty high stakes in terms of trade with Canada. So they buy 300 billion of our goods. We buy about 340 billion of their goods. And as last I checked, the USMCA was negotiated by Trump 1.0. So where do you think we end up in all of this, Katie?
Well, we may end up with an additional trade deal that the president believes is better for the American people. But the bottom line is, even if there aren't as many people in Canada who want to give up the country, there are a lot of people that the new administration can work with in Canada, common sense on the economy, to get to the table and at least change some things that he doesn't like that they've seen happening over the past 4 years. I find it very interesting that these ministers who have flown down to Mar-a-Lago after Trudeau flew down there himself to have a one-on-one meeting, are meeting with Tom Homan, who is the new border czar. So Trump is not only using tariffs as a way to push for more border security and to combat fentanyl and to combat terrorism and terrorists who come across the northern border, which is the longest border in the world. And so it's very interesting to see how they're using the economics to push on other issues, not just the trade deficit and maybe a new trade deal that Trump may want for the country.
Yeah, Joey, I want to pick up on that with Tom Homan. He seems to have become really a central player in this transition. And you have Democrats and Republicans that are talking to him. You have Mayor Adams here in New York City that had a meeting with him. Do you think that the Canadians being ready to play ball so quickly, so they have a new border security bill to invest another $1 billion in this, they clearly know that it's a central plank of Trump's platform and what he wants to do moving forward. They're also all up for re-election. Right, and Trudeau is forecasted to lose. Do you think they're foreseeing a Trump-like movement north of the border as well and trying to stamp that out?
I think you've seen it throughout the Western world in some ways. And I don't know if it's Trump-like. I define Trumpism, make America great again, make North America great again now, as populism, as mainstream populism. It's an opportunity for people to feel heard and seen and to feel like you're not speaking for us as some big corporation that puts a movie out with an agenda, one way or the other. You're not speaking for us if your version of DEI puts a disadvantage towards, my kid that's white and male. And so that I don't think is conservatism. I think it's common sense. And I think that that's what you see sweeping across most places that have any form of representative democracy. But when it comes to Canada specifically, when you look at the list of things that we import at high levels, kind of towards the top of the list is oil and gas. You can go all the way back, the Keystone Pipeline, I believe, was Canadian oil and gas. Mm-hmm. So if President Trump is going to drill, baby, drill in Alaska, and he's going to keep our energy cheap and make us energy independent again, he can't tariff oil and gas and get that accomplished probably, or at least not immediately. So if he does this, and the other one is vehicles, and he's spoken to and a lot about Detroit and the vehicles that are made in this country and in Mexico and in other places. So I would predict that if tariffs were the way, chances are some of these things are carved out anyway. But I mean, the truth is he doesn't want an econ war. He doesn't want a trade war. He wants a secure border. He wants to fulfill his main promise, which is to keep bad things and bad people out of our country as much as possible. And I don't understand how Canada can't be a partner in that. So I don't know why it would have to get to the point of tariffs to begin with.
But that is where he started with all of this.
Yeah.
Right? With the 25%.
Yes, and that was the point, to have an economic impact quickly that is obviously beneficial to Americans. And I agree with Tyrus. I don't think that there are 50% of Canadians who are like, we don't want any national independence at all. We don't want our own identity. We just want to be like the cold, forgotten part of America where people maybe go see Vancouver once every 5 years. I don't think they're dying for that either, but I do have faith that these Canadian conservatives do want a better way of life. Canada has some really manly men, and they are forgotten because they're represented by Justine Trudeau, who wanted to give Americans a lecture that, we failed because we didn't elect Kamala and we didn't elect Hillary. Well, that's because American voters rationally looked at these two candidates and said, maybe they don't represent my personal interests. And they look at Donald Trump and they go, I like some of the things he has to say. I'm going to give him a shot once again. But the difference is there are a lot of Americans who want their politicians to work with Donald Trump, not just work against him. And I think that might be how a lot of Canadians feel. But they also want the agreement to benefit their lives economically and in every other way possible. If that means that it's easier to travel between the United States and Canada, that's fantastic. I do think this president wants a secure border. I think that he's trolling. He doesn't want a 51st state, because if you want a secure border, the first thing you do is not dissolve it. So I think people are taking some of his jokes too literally.
Right. How did we say it in the first term? Like, never take him literally.
Seriously, but not literally.
Seriously, but not literally.
Literally. Yes.
The 47th president of the United States of
I
America.
also would fit in that description.
Congressman Mike Lawler, who is also on the Foreign Affairs and Financial Services Committees. Congressman, thank you for joining us this afternoon. I want to get to this headline here. You've got yesterday, or these meetings today, and then last month you've got Prime Minister Justin Trudeau coming down to Mar-a-Lago. Do you think we'd see this type of engagement if it weren't for the threat of tariffs?
No, I don't, frankly. I think obviously tariffs can be an effective tool in forcing folks to the negotiating table. I think President Trump used them effectively in his first term. And obviously you saw how quickly both Mexico and Canada responded just over a month ago. The fact is that they need to work with us when it comes to securing our border. Earlier this year, we introduced legislation in Congress to force the Biden administration to take action on our northern border, where fentanyl was pouring in, so much so that it could kill 270 million Americans. And we saw double the number of border crossings through 2024 that we saw in 2023. So we have a crisis both at our southern and northern borders when it comes to the, undaunted flow of migrants coming through, as well as fentanyl, and we need to crack down on it. And I think that's what President Trump is signaling to our allies in Canada and Mexico, that they need to take this seriously and they need to work with us, or there's going to be hell to pay when it comes to trade.
You know, Congressman, you usually don't think of Canada and the United States as having much of a confrontational relationship, but has it been? Have the Canadian government officials been easy to work with on this, or do they need some prodding here?
Look, I think President Trump's approach, obviously, when it comes to foreign affairs, has been different than presidents in the past. But frankly, it's necessary. I think many of our allies have taken the U.S. for granted for a very long time. They don't necessarily always feel they need to come to the negotiating table, and they feel that they have leverage in these discussions. But the fact is that Canada relies heavily on the United States, and we rely on them in part. But the reality is that they are very reliant on the U.S. economy and trade. And so it is critical that if we're going to be, strong partners, strong allies, that they work together with us on critical issues, including securing our border and stopping the massive influx of migrants from Canada into the U.S.
I want to talk about the other half of this equation, and that's the tariffs that the president-elect is threatening. This item appeared in the Wall Street Journal recently, and in it, there's the argument, quote, that the problem is that Mr. Trump's tariff program would energize and empower the elites by directing governments to impose levies on allies and adversaries alike. He'd be giving more strength to the swamp monsters he's supposed to be defeating. So do tariffs work as a stick, perhaps, to get some concessions from allies and adversaries, but then implemented? Is there a real problem here?
Look, if it was tariffs alone, obviously that would not be an effective tool. The fact is we use tariffs as a leverage point with foreign countries. We use them as a leverage point to get companies to come back to the United States and to develop their products here. But it's also the tax and regulatory climate here in the United States that is critical. And the president has talked extensively about how we are going to tackle that, not only by extending many of the provisions of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, but obviously going after the regulatory regime here in the U.S. And making it easier for people to do business here in the U.S. And that obviously is paramount when you're dealing with all of this. And the last thing I'd say is, look, energy policy is critical. And we need to increase domestic production of energy, which impacts the cost of goods, the cost of transportation, and the cost of manufacturing. And that is critical if we're going to get companies to bring back their operations here to the United States.
America's neighbors to the north are hopping on the MAGA train. I've heard they call themselves Maple MAGAs. Some Canadians jumping at President-elect Trump's offer of huge tax cuts if they become the 51st state. We shall see. Kevin O'Leary, chairman of O'Leary Ventures, Mr. Wonderful, joins us now. Kevin, you are a man from the north. This is your native land. What are you hearing? Is this for real? What are you hearing from people up there?
More than half of Canadians, there's 41 million of them, want to know more, want to understand what the proposal really is, because the concept of an economic union has been bandied around for 40 years. And it makes sense because the resources Canada have, the U.S. needs, particularly power and water. But there's something else. You know, we've been talking about the border between Canada and the United States. That's not the problem. The Pentagon is worried, and has been for decades, about the northern border where China and the USSR are. And we had NORAD decades ago, but China was a nothing burger back then. Now they're a serious problem. And I think in this kernel of an idea, and yes, maybe it was a joke to start, there is something great here to be done, because if you figured out a way to put these two countries together, it would be the most powerful country on earth, the most powerful military on earth, the most powerful in resources, and no adversary anywhere would mess with it. That's the prize.
Yeah. Let's start with this idea that this is just the beginning of negotiations. People are talking about it. I want to just throw up a survey. They actually polled Canadians about this already. And this is what Canadians said about becoming the 51st state. 13% said yes, so there is a crowd there. 82% said no. But Kevin, what you're saying is maybe it doesn't have to be about taking the land. Maybe you can broker some kind of an economic union. That's what you want to help do, right?
Yeah, that poll is irrelevant. The opportunity is combining strengths. You don't have to sell the country. You don't have to even merge it. But you can create a union where you put together the things that matter: a common currency, a common passport, free-flowing trade across the border, particularly in energy. And think about what that means. Right now, the U.S. grid is tapped out. You can't find a gigawatt of electrical power. There's unlimited power in Canada. And even Eric Schmidt said that at Google because they're concerned about building data centers. All of these opportunities exist. Now, unfortunately for Trump, these ministers are going down to talk to him, Mar-a-Lago, are going to get wiped out in 90 days in a national election. Trudeau is immensely unpopular, and Canadians cannot wait to get rid of him. So this may have to wait from an official standpoint, but many Canadians are interested in understanding more about how we could push this idea forward, and I'm one of them. I think this is a great idea, and I think the potential is massive, and the opportunity is huge. And I think at the end of the day, Canadians and Americans, their DNA is the same in terms of what they believe in: freedom. They fought in multiple wars together. I say let's make this happen one way or another and end up the strongest entity on earth. I'm worried about China. I really am. I think we're in the beginning of a long economic war. And if we're stronger and protecting the northern border and really making it hell for them around the world with our philosophy of freedom and commerce and strength, that's a good thing.
Are you going down to Mar-a-Lago?
I'd love to go down to Mar-a-Lago. You know, I'm obviously interested in it because I do business on both sides of the border. And I'm going to the inauguration. I'm excited about it. I have a lot of projects in both countries. I work with senators and governors, and I walk the aisles of the Hill all the time, as I do in Ottawa. You can't do business anymore unless you're working with leadership in both countries. So I'm a big advocate of figuring out how to get this thing together.
Well, if you can get it together, Kevin, please give us the scoop. We want to break it with you right here.
Look, I'm a very rational guy. I could make this happen with nobody be unhappy about it.
I bet you could. Big ideas, but exciting times.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.